What is a weird industry secret that you discovered while working for a company? Worked as a software dev for Carfax about 9 years ago. Their software for producing history reports was so fast, could get a report in less than 10 milliseconds, that users didn't believe it actually crunched the data, so the front-end team added a fake progress bar that waited a short random time. I believe this fake bar is still there today. I just submitted my taxes with TurboTax, and it was the same BS. The worst was that I wanted to quickly spin through all the forms to double-check some things, and it was like, optimizing, analyzing, for 10 seconds between each page. I guess they want you to feel like you're getting your money's worth. It just felt cheesy to me. Worked for a murder mystery dinner theater briefly. The identity of the killer wasn't determined ahead of time, it was simply whoever got the lowest amount of votes from the audience. Well, there goes whatever faith I had in the integrity of the dinner theater business. Not sure if this is just a British thing, but when I worked at McDonald's, they have a leaderboard to show where their drive-thru ranks compared to every other McDonald's drive-thru in the country. It was pretty intense. I worked in a store that had something like that. Regional management loved to grill the staff on why they weren't doing the same numbers as staff at the flagship store in London. When I pointed out that one of the staff members at the London store had actually worked with me a few months prior, and that he did half my numbers when he did, they said, "We're discussing your performance, not theirs." Not sure it's a secret, but if you could see the state of the spaghetti cabling that makes up your internet connectivity, you would lose faith in your ISP. Faith in ISPs remains the same since hitting bedrock last decade. Telecommunications and finance. If you were having trouble getting a refund or complaint seen through, they will often break when you put in a complaint to the relevant ombudsman or watchdog. I was trying to get a refund from a stockbroker site due to an error on their system, and when I complained to the ombudsman, they immediately contacted me to settle as opposed to having a drawn-out complaint through the watchdog. What is this word ombudsman? You're one mistyped key away for being legally dead. Thankfully it's an easy fix and double-check boxes exist too. At least 10 patients a week are accidentally pronounced dead in the system before they realize, oh, shit. That's room 408 not 407, they're alive, and are quickly digitally revived. If we didn't have several checks, honestly, some people might accidentally be found legally dead while perfectly alive. Had a friend that is a physiotherapist. Every time we had to discharge a patient, he would put expired because he thought it meant their insurance had expired when actually it means they passed away. He went 3 weeks killing off multiple people in the system who would still be walking around the facility. Lawyers and the government are the reason why we still have fax machines. Hospitals and doctors' offices as well. I knew reality TV wasn't what it purported to be, but had no idea how bad. I worked on America's Got Talent, Season 7, and got to film a few episodes. The most heartbreaking thing was that I watched them take people I got to spend an hours interviewing and talking to, people who were passionate, who were trying, and most of the time skilled, and the judges just got to fucking mock them on a national scale. In the Season 7 St. Louis episode, there's an older woman who plays the drums, and she was genuine and sweet and excited, and in the edits, they make her look loopy and crazy, and I think Sharon Osbourne alluded to the fact the drummer was a crazy woman. Laughed at her on a national stage. I don't watch that show, but that seems really sad. Working in the auto industry, I was surprised to learn how little of a car is actually made by, say, Mercedes or Ford. There is a complex network of suppliers who specialize in developing and manufacturing most of the pieces that make up a car and then selling them to car companies. The manufacturers themselves largely just assemble outsourced parts into the final product. Not sure if it's weird, but ink cartridges for inkjet printers cost nothing to manufacture, pennies really. The markup on them is crazy. Some manufacturers program them so they go bad by a certain date regardless of how much ink is left in them. The profit on them is so high they used to lose money on the printers knowing they'd make it all back in your first purchase of new ink. Working in the ice cream industry for a few years, I found out that most places will claim there is no cross-contamination, but they often use the same scoops or scrapers for different ice creams without anything but a quick rinse of water or setting in a bucket of mixed ice cream water. If you have extremely bad and sensitive allergies to something that may be in ice cream, ask them to use a completely fresh scooper, especially if it's somewhere you're unfamiliar with. When I worked at 2 different ice cream shops, we used actual sanitizer to clean the scoops in between uses, but we still had signs up everywhere stating that we couldn't guarantee there wasn't cross-contamination and had to verbally say it to every customer that disclosed an allergy. It would have been a huge liability otherwise. Although if you have severe allergies, you should already understand that an ice cream shop is a risky place. This'll get buried, but I recently quit my job in journalism due to the mental strain. Needed to get out. Shit is fucked. From local government all the way up, it's a shit show. Nobody actually knows what they're doing, and maybe one or two here and there actually care about their position and its importance, but man. People need to think harder about who they vote for. And get your well water checked for PFAs. Oh, and COVID numbers are so much higher than those reported. So many asymptomatic cases, people in denial who won't get tested, people who write it off as allergies or the flu. My colleague interviewed a woman who dropped her husband off at the early on with COVID symptoms. She never saw him again. He died there, she couldn't visit, and at that time they weren't releasing bodies. Don't wait until it's you or your loved one to take precautions, please. We're sick of writing about death and it not making an impression on anyone. I covered cops in courts primarily before the pandemic, in Michigan, for COVID context. If anybody has questions about any random MI-related police, court topics, ask away. I'm useless now, sharing a twin bed with my dog at my mom's place. So please ask, I crave purpose. Someone get this man to the top. Nursing. There's way more Googling of stuff than you realize. Most of us have a decent set of knowledge, but there's no way you can know everything. I'm surprised I don't hear about this more. Even the best mechanic and IT guy can't memorize every theory, case, specification, etc., so I always figured there's just no way any human doctor could. What they have is a wealth of education and experience to guide their Googling. One question. What did they do before Google? Fake it, or slow things down so they can consult books? Thrift store, particularly *savers*, we'd get over 10,000 pounds of donations every day and only a small fraction of that would reach the sales floor. The rest was thrown away to the garbage. The company will have you believe it's recycled, or donated to those in need, but as a backroom laborer I can promise it goes straight to the garbage. I blew this whistle back in 2012 and so that may have changed, but I wanted people to know that their donations were being thrown to the garbage simply because one button was missing or it was too wrinkly. My mom works in Goodwill, and it's exactly the same. She always complains on how a lot of people yeet perfectly good things into the trash can. If it is too worn out though they throw it away. Only about 5% of all the donations end up in the store. Don't know how pervasive this is, but commercial rum distilleries bottle the exact same rum under different names and in different bottles. This even happens for major brands, like if the Mount Gay distillery can't keep up with orders they'll contract with the Malibu distillery to fill their bottles. I can't speak for that specific example, but in the whiskey industry there are lots of brands that are owned by huge parent companies and distilled at the same massive distilleries, or smaller independent brands that contract their distilling out to those companies, but it's not just the same whiskey in different bottles. They often reuse the same mash for multiple products, but it's aged differently. I worked for a supermarket for a while. They used to review CCTV, and if they spotted someone stealing they would take a screenshot, then print the photo and hang it on the wall in our canteen so we'd recognize the person if we saw them in our store again. So I used to have lunch in a room with walls covered in photos of PPLS faces with descriptions like, stole 10 steaks. Left without paying, took 5 bottles of wine, lol. In most medium-plus companies, you're probably just one filing error away from wrongful termination. Because, as with most companies, our employee IDs are our first initial and last name. P. Gibbons, Blumberg, like that. Well, someone in the parent company had the exact same employee ID as me. And he pissed somebody at the parent company off real bad. All I know is, incredible sexual harassment claims filed by multiple employees. No other details. But somehow, that employee's file ended up in my company's HR rather than the parent company's HR. So, my HR terminated my employment, instead of the parent company's HR terminating him, and they were getting ready to call security to have me escorted out of the building. Somehow, my boss found out about it and then he got everything fixed up. But if he'd called out sick that day, and so technically, I was fired for almost a full day at my job without even knowing about it until after it was over and everything was okay again. No one has any idea what's going on in the Navy. In any branch really. At an international cinema chain in my country, they make the popcorn a week ahead of time. It is held in dark plastic bags and they store them in a dark room. They get reheated a bit just before they are sold. Never again will I eat popcorn, especially from that chain. I worked for a very fancy, very expensive cinema during college. We didn't even pop our own popcorn. It came in what were basically trash bags and sat in the dusty back storeroom for weeks before being tipped into a warming bin and sold for ridiculous prices. I worked at a fancy country club for years and a lot of their food was bought from Walmart. They'd make many meals ahead of time, freeze them and then thaw them and reheat them for their fancy membership. If the members knew, they'd probably freak the fuck out. Note: that particular country club had been struggling since the 90s. While I was there it just got worse and worse. I wonder how they fared through the pandemic. They heavily depended on golf events, weddings and other big events. Also, that particular country club has a really bad chef. I mean not bad as in making horrible food, but bad as in he was a misogynistic sexual harasser. He even made a physical sexual pass at his boss. She made a complaint to the board of directors and it went nowhere because the country club has their chef attached to their brand. So he could practically get away with murder because the country club needed him. Chef culture is incredibly toxic, so many such stories. Landscaping. The people who work in your yard for more than 4 hours are not holding it. If you don't offer them the bathroom, they probably peed in your yard. That's cool, I pee in the yard sometimes too. Worked in a textile factory making stuff for brands like Reebok, Fila, Levi's, Shirts Only, Billabong, etc. Any off-spec items would be put aside and sold in bulk to people selling them in flea markets. So not everything you see in a flea market is fake. Some may be the real deal, but not up to the standard required by the brand. Also, if the factory didn't have orders, they'd take leftover fabric, cut it up with the same sizing of those brands and make off-brand clothes to go down the same route and keep people busy. Lastly, they had a shop where items made there were sold at production cost to employees. I was never one to buy brands, but that was enough to put me off them for good. I'm confused about the last one. You're upset that they were making stuff specifically to be sold to employees at a steep discount? I didn't learn this while working for the company, but back when those easy bake cake boxes were first introduced back in the 50s, the instructions were to just add water, then bake. And they didn't sell well, because that felt way too artificial. So the marketing people checked with the scientists. Instead of only water, what if they add eggs? And milk? And a touch of oil? And the scientists were like, whatever, can add any liquid, this stuff will cook into a cake. So they added these ingredients to the instructions and customers felt like they were really cooking. And sales went crazy. I'm a guy and people have been impressed that I know how to bake a cake from scratch. It isn't that hard. A basic cake might have self-raising flour, eggs, butter, sugar and a couple of other ingredients. Basically you just have to find a recipe and follow it. Used to work at a pretty well-known hotel chain and we had to hit quarterly deadlines, one being a certain amount of members we had to sign up. The number was impossible to get, so the duty managers would go through the old files of previous guests and use their emails to sign them up as members and tick the "I don't want to be notified or emailed about any company name offers." I don't know if this is a common thing among other workplaces, but yeah, maybe check to see that you haven't been signed up as a member at any hotels. You're wrong if you think your bank's computing system is a state-of-the-art mega computer on a fancy location, with the latest technology on it. Most of the time the backend is a really old IBM mainframe that cost too much to replace, that handles transactions through some Perl scripts that somebody wrote in 1994. That ancient system is highly protected from the outside internet, not because of the safety of your finances, but because any sneeze could break that mainframe. I worked for a company doing sign installation. We did neon, LED lettering and huge signage. Giant Canadian Tire triangles, huge 30-foot long signs to hang off the sides of buildings. I'll never forget rolling a 8-foot tall O through an office building. Our industry's weird secret could have been a few things. But the one that blew my mind was the amount of illegal underground Chinese casinos accessible by trapdoor or hidden back room. They would have it set up like a gaming room with neon and LED signage everywhere. One of our biggest neon customers were several of these on the outskirts of Toronto. Jack Astor's came a close second. LMAO. Chickens raised cage-free have a higher mortality rate than those raised in confinement. If you want eggs from a chicken that may have had a moderately decent existence, you want pasture-raised. Yay, cage-free, free range doesn't even mean shit. Just because there are no cages doesn't mean the chickens aren't still overstuffed into giant factory farm warehouses. I used to underwrite auto loans. If you obtain financing at a dealership, the dealer can hold points up to 2% in some states. So if they tell you you're getting an 8% rate from the bank, you might really be getting 6%, and they are allowed to add those 2 extra percent and reap the difference. Important to note, you are allowed to ask if they are doing this, and they are obligated to tell you. They are not obligated not to hold the points, but it weakens their leverage if you ask this question. Have fun. It's usually better, especially on used cars, to try to get pre-approved for financing by your own bank, or better yet, a credit union, ahead of time. That way, you can negotiate knowing you have a rate and term locked in. If the dealer can beat that, great. If not, at least you know what you're going to be looking at ahead of time. GameStop owns Game Informer magazine. They give good reviews to games that sell to GameStop for cheap. The cheaper you sell your game to GameStop, the better reviews you get.
Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.